how's it going? Back again with another video this week. I hope everyone has had a great week. Quickly coming up on the holidays here. If you celebrate Christmas or Hanukkah or Kwanzaa or any other holidays that happen around this year, I wish you a healthy and happy holiday season. This will be my last video before I take a break for the holidays, so I just wanted to say that up front. But what I wanted to talk about today was an interesting question that came up in a group I belong to on Facebook. Someone was trying to calculate their macro percentages or macros using percentages. So I forget what the exact percentages were, but let's say, just as for the sake of argument, they had, I'm going to eat 20% protein, 30% carbs, and the rest, which would be 50% of my calories, would come from fat. And so all that really means is you take your total calories that you want to eat, you think you should eat a day. Say you're eating 2,000 calories a day, and you're going to say that 20% of those calories are supposed to come from protein, or 30% is supposed to come from carbs, or 50% is supposed to come from fat. So for example, if you're eating 2,000 calories a day and you want 50% of those calories to come from fat, you'd be eating 1,000 calories a day in fat, which I'm not saying is right or wrong or anything like that, but just giving you an example. And in general, it's quite popular for people to calculate their macronutrients using percentages like that. You'll hear about different macro quote unquote splits using percentages, and that's one way to do it. But it gets a little, in my opinion, to be a little error prone, because it's not the best way. It's not the most accurate way to calculate your macros, and you can run into a little bit of trouble based on your requirements, because your requirements for certain macronutrients aren't based upon necessarily a percentage, right? So for example, the best example I can give about this would be protein, right? You can say, oh, I'm going to consume 20% of my calories from protein, but really protein, the amount of protein you eat has nothing to do with anything other than your lean body mass. You need enough protein to maintain, or you want enough protein to maintain your lean body mass. And by using a percentage, you might undershoot that number, because it doesn't necessarily represent total calories, doesn't necessarily have anything to do with your lean body mass. And it can be a little bit detrimental to use percentages in terms of protein. And you really want to use, for protein, you want to use what your lean body mass is, or just to make things easy, I usually say 1 gram per pound of ideal body weight. Now that might be a little bit more than you're required to eat, because it's not necessarily your lean body mass, but it's close enough. And for most people, it's not going to be detrimental to eat a little bit more protein. In fact, it's going to be beneficial for them to eat a little bit more protein than they need. But so that's one example why percentages failed. Another good case where percentages would fail is if you're someone who's extremely active and you're trying to calculate carbohydrate intake off of a percentage, that again may completely undershoot your need for carbohydrates, right? If you're a very active person doing a lot of activity, maybe you're an athlete, etc., and you're using a percentage to try and figure out how many carbohydrates you're eating, but your carbohydrates shouldn't just be based on some random percentage. They should be based on your performance, your activity, your recovery, your demands, etc. And you could really undershoot and shoot yourself in the foot by using a percentage for carbohydrates. And the same is true for fat. You might end up being too low if you're trying to follow some low fat macronutrient percentage calculation, right? And for some people, that might put them in a very low fat intake that's really below what is actually considered healthy. And that can be detrimental too, right? So percentages, when you see percentages on the internet about how to calculate your macros, maybe more often than not, they might work for most people. But in certain cases, I've seen it time and time again that it really can be error prone, and people end up eating just way too little. And especially because most people are trying to lose weight. And so they're eating very small amounts of calories. And so the percentages don't match up really well with the amount of calories they're eating, because they end up with very little calories, and then they therefore the certain macronutrients are going to be low. And if your protein, for example, is one of those macronutrients, you're not doing yourself any favors, especially if your goal is fat loss, by losing a bunch of muscle mass either. It's just, I've seen it time and time again where people really shoot themselves in the foot by trying to follow a percentage rather than trying to calculate their macros another way. And what I really encourage people to do is first, when trying to figure out their macros, is to first come up with a total caloric intake that they'd like to eat. And there's plenty of calculators online. I'm going to point to a free video and guide that I created for calculating your macronutrients, but there's plenty of places you can go to online to get this done. And these calculators are going to be a guess at best, right? The best way to really try and figure out your ideal caloric intake is to get what's called a resting metabolic rate test. Usually you have to go to a lab to have that done because they have to measure the amount of CO2 and oxygen you're breathing at rest in a fasted state, etc. It's certainly available. So I wouldn't say it's possible to get, but it might be inaccessible for a lot of people and something people don't want to do. And even that is not 100% accurate either, but it's probably the closest we can get to being accurate. But for most people, they're going to use some type of calculator. And again, I'll point to the one that I've created, a guide that I've created with a little Excel spreadsheet, and a Google Sheet spreadsheet that does all the calculations for you. But you'll get an idea what the calories are that you might want to intake to keep yourself in weight maintenance. And then you're going to first calculate your protein. So you're going to say, my ideal body weight is 150 pounds. So I'm going to eat 150 grams of protein. And then you're going to take that 150 grams of protein and you're going to multiply it times 4. And you're going to get the number of calories you're going to need to eat for protein, right? So then now that you have the number of calories that you're going to eat for protein, you're going to subtract that from the total calories that you want to eat in a day. And now you're left with the amount of calories that you need to eat between fat and carbohydrates. Now, how many grams of fat, how many grams of carbohydrates should you use? This one's a little bit harder to answer for a lot of people because it's going to be different. There depends on your activity level, depends on your preferences, depends on a lot of things, right? Digestion, foods that you really tolerate or don't tolerate, that type of stuff. Let's just take, for example, say someone's following a ketogenic diet and they're only going to eat 50 grams of carbs. Again, so we have a set number of carbs that we want to eat to maintain ketosis. So we're going to multiply that times 4 because there's 4 calories per gram of carbohydrates. And you get, I believe if I'm doing my math correctly, that's 200 calories. So again, you're going to subtract that away from the calories that you have left for carbohydrates and fats. And so whatever that number is, minus 200. And then you're left with the calories that you have to eat for fat. And now how many grams of fat do you get from that? You just divide that number by 9 and you get the number of grams of fat that you're left to eat. So now you have your macros in a very concrete way, right? Now, if you're not following a ketogenic diet or have a set number of carbs that you really want to eat, it's all about experimentation. You can split the carbs and fats evenly. You can bias one or the other based on just preferences. I tend to eat more higher fat foods, or I tend to eat more carbohydrate rich foods. I'm more active, so I really need a lot more carbohydrates. So I'm going to bias more carbohydrates there. Pick a good solid number where you think you feel pretty comfortable and use that number as the gram of carbohydrates that you want to eat, and then figure out the rest from fat after that. But either way, it doesn't really matter. It's all personal preference, and it's honestly all experimentation. You might need to tweak the total calories that you're consuming based on the results that you're trying to get. If you're trying to, for example, lose weight and you pick a calorie number and you're not losing weight, you probably need to lower that. If you're trying to gain muscle and you're trying to see the weight on a scale go up and you're not seeing muscle gain or body composition changes that you want to see, you might need to increase your calories, right? Or you're trying to maintain your weight and you're noticing that you're losing weight or you're gaining weight, then you might have to shift the calories up or down and then recalculate the macros based on that. And you might find that, I actually feel a little bit better. I want to eat more carbohydrates. So you might shift the split of the carbs and fats that you have left over to do that. And I know that's a lot of math and can sound a little complicated. It's hard to explain verbally, but again, I have a video with a guide with a spreadsheet that does all this stuff for you, explains it all for you. And I'm going to link that in the description below. But as I said, the main point of this video is really, it's not good. It's not the best approach to use percentages when calculating your macronutrients. You're better off to use hard numbers based on the goals that you want and your diet and the dietary preferences that you have and your protein requirements. So protein requirements are first, then what goals do you have? And then what dietary preferences are you going to use to reach those goals? Weight loss, I'm going to go lower carb because I want to lose weight. And I'm going to set my goal carbohydrate at this number. And then I'm going to eat the rest in fat. Or I'm an athlete and I really want my carbohydrates to be high because my performance is of utmost importance to me. So I'm going to set my carbs to be higher and my fat to be lower. And you tweak and calculate things based on that. That's the high level summary of what I wanted to convey this week. Again, if you have any questions, which I'm sure you do, because there's a lot of math and it's pretty complicated, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. But the main takeaway for this video is really just try not to use percentages as a way of calculating your macros because it can be error prone. And I see a lot of people under eating protein, carbs, and fats because they're using percentages, and that doesn't work for really their goals or the amount of calories that they need to eat or want to eat or should eat, etc. And so it's just not a very solid approach to do things. Instead, we need to use hard numbers, starting with protein and then deciding where you want to go based on carbs and fats. Again, have any questions, please let me know. Leave a comment below, direct message me, send me an email, however you want to get in touch with me. And if you need help dialing in your diet, please, and you want some one-on-one help, some hands-on approach, I have a lot of one-on-one spots open for clients, especially as we're coming up on the new year here. Please reach out to me. You can always go to rjbhealth.coach, click on the schedule discovery call button right on the homepage. I set up a time to chat with me, fill out the form, and I'll get back to you and we can chat a little bit about doing one-on-one coaching, or you can send me a message if you're interested and we can chat a little bit more about that. I offer a free 30-minute call with you to discuss how that works and get you comfortable with the process and see if we're a good fit. And if you're into that, I'm happy to jump on a call with you. Thanks again, everyone. I hope you have a happy holiday season, and I'll chat to you all